Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us in today's webinar. The topic is build versus buy for e-commerce. Quick intro to who I am. I am Arnold Chong. I'm the inside sales lead at Avantico. I'm joined here with Richard Lee from Dynamic Web. He will be presenting on, depending on where your organization is headed, whether you should buy or build an e-commerce platform. We have a long-standing partnership with Dynamic Web, and Richard will be presenting their e-commerce solution that's being used globally in 13 countries today. Richard is the product evangelist and online specialist for Dynamic Web North America. He's a problem solver who pulls from 2 decades of web and e-commerce development to paint a vision of digital transformation to companies both large and small. Before I get started, I want to tell you a little bit about who we are as an organization, and then I'll pass it over to Richard. So we're formerly known as AX Mentor, but was recently rebranded to Avantico. So if the name sounds familiar, you know why, and it's because we've been around for many years. We've rebranded to align with Microsoft's new initiatives to focus on D365 and not just AX, although we support all versions of AX. Avantico was founded in 2006. We've been a Microsoft partner ever since. We have members of our team who are part of the Microsoft TAP program. We're heavily involved with the user group community on the 365 AX UG side, as well as the CRM UG side. Our headquarters is in San Diego with several other offices in California, in Temecula and Irvine. We also have a European presence in UK and Denmark, where our founders are from, and where AX originated. And we have experts who work with the platform since the very beginning. Our vertical expertise is focused on manufacturing and distribution, but we do cover a wide breadth of other verticals that include, but are not limited to, professional services, financial services, retail, and public sector. We're a full stack partner, so we have services that cover 365, AX, CRM, as well as ISV development. We can help you with general help desk services, road mapping, full implementation life cycles, as well as managed support and post-live support services. If you have any questions throughout this webcast, please post them on the right-hand side, and I'll read them off at the end. And with that, I will pass it over to Richard.
Thanks very much, Arnold. And thank you for the introduction and the opportunity to present in joint with Avantico today. So today's topic is build versus buy, which is often a big question that everyone has on their minds. And there's lots of pros and cons on both, and sometimes you really can never really know which is going to be the better option, to be perfectly honest. And so we're going to go over the pros and cons, the different project types that might dictate one over the other. And then I'm going to give you a brief introduction to Dynamic Web, which is a platform company. So you might think I'm biased around the topic because I work for a platform company, but I'm a seasoned IT professional in web development space, and having done projects myself that there were no platforms at the time, and something had to be made, and a project that I'm thinking of recently that had no platform, and then after making something, turned out that thing is a platform in and of itself, and it actually had a chance to have a second life in another project with a larger group of people. So that's always nice when that happens. But let's dive right in and take a look here at the very first thing here, and this is just a sales order form. This is probably on a piece of paper floating around in an office, and this is how things were done prior to the web. And for many businesses, this is how things still occur today. They might have this as a file sent by email as a Word file, printed out on the other side, people fill it in, and maybe, God forbid, they fax it or they read it off by phone. And so companies that move from this format to online, we call that digital transformation, and there's many moving parts related to that. But just to point out, in something as basic as this is what people are trying to achieve. They're trying to basically input the quantity, confirm that the description of this item that they've added quantity 10 of is indeed what they're looking for. What is the unit price? Tally up the total. If there's taxes involved, calculate that. And that constitutes an order, and repeat that over line after line. And so when embarking on a project of making a e-commerce site, whether it's just a simple way for orders to be placed online or by some online method, and then maybe somebody takes those orders that showed up online and manually keys them into the ERP. That's a possibility as well. So I'm trying to paint here today, the pros and cons of doing one over the other. But, if you keep in mind that all projects essentially are works in progress, that, you try maybe going the DIY route, the custom development route, and the challenges that you face in that world are kind of, just juxtaposing that to the other challenges of a platform. That a platform, even though it's pre-made already and maybe in a budget that you can afford, isn't always the panacea that you seek. So let's move on here. So this diagram here I often show because it covers like an elephant in the room when dealing with the DIY or the custom development route. And let's say when it comes to e-commerce, you speak with a consultant, and the consultant has an idea of what she already knows about e-commerce, that there's going to be a shopping cart, there's a product catalog, you list the products on a list page, in a details view, you see more information about a product, you have a login, you have a shopping cart. So let's summarize an e-commerce solution as just that. Of course, this being with a partner in the AX space, D365 space, and us being an e-commerce and integrated solution, we're talking about an integrated e-commerce solution. But let's say you wanted to go off grid and it's not necessarily integrated yet, because let's say you're brand new at this, you've never done e-commerce before, it's in demand, it's socially the norm, but you've not done it yet. So you embark on doing this yourself, but the assumption is, let's say that anyone who is part of this team has at least knowledge of what to do, or they know that we have to have A/B split tests, but I have no idea how to actually make that. But then there's an even larger piece of this puzzle of body of knowledge called what you don't know, you don't know. So let's say prior to joining Dynamic Web, and the platform has a system inside there called gamification. I call it gamification, but nobody else in the company called it that. But what it does, it was new to me, was that it was capable of tracking users independent of Google Analytics and independent of shopping transactions and things like that in ways that I didn't even know existed. So that's an example of what you don't know, you don't even know. So I couldn't even Google this because I didn't even know what it's called or why would someone need this. So that kind of missing element is what becomes a blind spot when you're developing on your own. If it's clear and concise of what you're doing, and you know that you're going from that sales order form to something online, you can pretty much reverse engineer that paper form to create an online form with obviously an appropriate developer or developers to assist you with that aspect of it. But then if you one day discover someone who maybe is using a platform or had a custom development job where it was very inclusive of all of these features that might be part and parcel to the platform world, but not in the custom world, you see something, you're like, aha, wow, that's amazing, but I would have never thought of that. And that's where this big blue slice of the pie exists. And something I just want to point out, that sometimes even having all the brightest heads in the room and on your team doesn't mean that that gets you to a point where you feel that a solution or a feature within the solution was reached because of that collective body of knowledge. Sometimes even though those smartest guys in the rooms were not thinking of that other thing. All right, so just pointing that out. So now let's take us on a little tour here of the pros and cons, or more of like what is the expectation of when you go custom versus when you go platform. So first item is expertise required. And here I'm showing it's required on both sides. It's often believed that only on the custom side you need expertise, but when you do a platform as well, this is now let me back up a little bit. So when I say build versus buy, I'm filling out build as build it 100% from custom from scratch, versus buy, you're buying a platform. But you're buying a platform that, whether it were WordPress, Magento, Dynamic Web, and then all the bigger ones, you're not just buying that and just through some magical way it just is automatically your solution. You have to customize it, maybe customize the look and feel of the website, customize some functionality, customize the aspects that are part and parcel to the way you operate your business and expectations, whether B2B or B2C. So you're basically leveraging a platform in order to add some customization on top of that, but still in the time that you may or may not have in developing, or the expertise, true expertise in developing it from scratch, a platform can give you a leg up. So let's say you've waited 20 years to get into digital transformation. Let's say e-commerce is around for 20 plus years. You have an opportunity to still compete head on against Amazon and against your competition by going with a platform. But the platform itself, it requires, evaluation, looking at the big, short, and long-term pictures of things, but it still requires expertise. Big difference between the two is that if you're building it from custom, then you own it 100%. Whereas, and of course this is obvious to some of you, that when you get a platform, you're paying a license fee, either upfront or ongoing, and ongoing could be upfront with a maintenance fee, or as a SaaS model where you're paying a monthly fee that includes improvements periodically, security, safety, all that stuff. But at the end of the day, that was software made by another company, and though you get a license, you don't own the product, except through that license and what the license permits. So that's the main difference there. In the custom development world, for some businesses, the ownership of the software provides a competitive advantage, and that's why it's gone that way. Just like you might own the equipment, you might own the plant, that gives you a competitive advantage for owning the equipment versus sourcing it out and not having control over the quality of it. Another difference here, again, kind of painted before with the platform, gives you a shorter go live date. So if you have a aggressive time frame of, let's say, we need to go live in 6 months to 9 months, and whereas if you have the ability to go with a custom solution, it's going to be a longer go live date, but that's because you're building everything from scratch. So the things you take for granted, like take for granted a login system, that would have to be built from scratch. You might take for granted the fact that you have customers, and then within that customer, let's say it's a B2B customer, they may have 10 people who are authorized to buy. So that kind of now, one-to-many relationship that you have to develop, that's all from scratch. So if you have an aggressive timeline, typically a platform would be the better option, and that's could be obvious for some of you. So features. So in a platform, commonly features are already baked in. I want to use a content management system. Okay, well, the content management system includes the capability of embedding videos and adding content, images, resizing images, you name it. Those are features already made. You might think of them if you're doing a custom solution, but you'll have to develop them. You might think of them when doing a platform, and that's where in choosing a platform, you're seeking those features in existence already. Flexibility. So obviously in a custom environment, you're basically making a custom-made suit that's going to fit you like a glove. In doing so, it takes more resources, it takes more time, but you get total flexibility on what you desire the site to operate and function as. Whereas platforms give you a structured environment, they can be rigid in the sense that you have to accept these features that we have already, or you don't, and you don't work with our product. So that's where, and sometimes with, this is being an e-commerce site, e-commerce is a blend of maybe two things. It's a blend of a brochure site where it's information about the products, and then the opportunity to purchase these products. And that's where the e-commerce part steps in, purchasing them by adding them to a cart and then checking out later. Your login automatically looks up maybe your the access to the products that you purchased, your pricing, your specific pricing, all those things that we take for granted the platforms are going to give, but sometimes customizations on top of that, maybe look and feel, or the way you manage content, or the way in which business rules or business logic is transferred from the ERP side. Sometimes platforms don't support that wholly and fully, and that's where, for the speed to market that you might get, or the go live date is faster, and it's got a bunch of features pre-made, you may have to sacrifice the fact that you lack total flexibility. And that leads into where, again, custom, it's built to fit, whereas a platform is a product, a commercial product that's designed for companies like yours, and hopefully hundreds, thousands, if not millions more just like that. So it means that it supports the needs of many. So on one hand, these features that are included for B2B or B2C solutions, or both, are what everybody desires. But then there are things that are unique to your business, and those unique things are where the realm of the customization on top of a platform, it might be the route that you have to take, whereas obviously you have that capacity to do with 100% custom. So there are sacrifices for sure to be made. All right, so next one here is I took some time to write up some project types of what you can imagine a project of this sorts, and should that be a platform or DIY? Now these are my my estimates based on looking at all of the sales that maybe came into our world, and including my other experience with custom development. But I'm open to discussion around this, and if you want, you can write a question related to this part. So let's start. So imagine a situation where there's no current e-commerce, and they're trying to build a proof of concept. And so imagine you're in a business where maybe you're doing a lot of EDI work, and the concept of having a more private channel like B2B or B2C is just not been on your radar. And now let's say management, a board of directors wants to experiment with that because someone's hearing that it's really popular these days, or Amazon and all that. So because it's a proof of concept, and because there's no current e-commerce, and because, let's say in the example I'm actually thinking of, where there's no proven examples even in their industry of whether e-commerce works or not, then I feel that the investment in it is tentative. It's not a full-on budget. It's not enough details to understand the market. So you really, that proof of concept is something that you're trying out and deploying. So it's likely not going to be integrated. It doesn't necessarily need a platform unless that platform were on the how do I be polite about it, like lower end. It's not integrated. So let's say it's a WordPress platform. That's an example of an inexpensive free platform that you can get something running, including using a plugin like WooCommerce to suddenly become an e-commerce site. It's nowhere near the capabilities of full-fledged business or B2C retail class e-commerce platforms, but from the perspective of you wanting to get into the game and try things out, that could be an opportunity for you. But still, I would be leaning towards the DIY thing, where imagine that sales order form that I showed earlier, you want to just make that live. That's a few hours of programming to make that happen. It's not integrated. It's not even taking any credit cards. There's no shopping cart. But in the very least, you now have a shingle on the web or your website that's capable of taking an order. No credit cards or anything like that, and the assumption is that order's coming in from a customer, an account, an existing account, but it's a good way in and a good starting point. Let's say here, integrated B2C with standard retail. So what that is it's integrated to their ERP, so let's say AX, and it's going to be a B2C site. So B2Cs in the retail realm, they want to have, let's say, gift cards. They want to have loyalty points. They want to have abandoned email cart reminders. Now, just those three features alone, to create that in the DIY custom development route, so gift cards is essentially a type of currency and payment that they buy, but then they can reuse, and that will decrease it incrementally based on the purchases made. That has to be made from scratch. That in and of itself is a project and a long-term effort. Then let's say you want to do the loyalty points. That's easier said than done. And then promo codes, which I didn't mention initially, but now thinking of it, promo codes like, here I'm going to have 10% off, or I want to have, if they buy this, then they get this at 50% off. That logic is very difficult to develop from scratch. So imagine then that's where a platform comes in. It's very handy in that, like, you can have maybe of the 10 features that the platform may include, you only need the first 2, and you can go live with that sooner than later, because you're not having to build even the things I didn't mention, like the login system, the user system, the address book where these customers are going to send things to. Those things have probably already been made and thought of, and not only made, but made so that you can configure them, not program them, not customize them, but configure them to act and behave a certain way later. And that's where a platform really is powerful, where sometimes a custom solution, there's no back end for you to adjust it and tweak it a little bit. You have to ask the programmers to make that for you. But with the platform, you're like, you know what? We just changed our street address. I can go in myself and modify that. And that's, again, another benefit of the platform. Another project type here, integrated B2B with an aggressive timeline. So you saw in that previous chart where when you have an aggressive timeline, whatever it might be, aggressive as acknowledged by numerous people and stakeholders in the company, like we want to go, let's say it's July, and we want to have an operating e-commerce site for the Christmas holiday season. Now that holiday season doesn't start in December. It doesn't even start in November anymore. It's starting off on Labor Day. That means your website has to be up and running, and that's far too aggressive a timeline. In fact, even with a platform, that would be very challenging, to put it nicely. But if you had an aggressive timeline of a reasonable amount of time, let's say 6 to 9 months, a platform is still a better way to go. A platform that has an integration built in already, Dynamic Web does, to AX, Nav, CRM, but has the B2B functionality so that, one-to-many relationship with working with customers, the address book that can handle infinite different shipping addresses, the ability to do quoting, the ability to recognize specific pricing. Those are things typically are included in the platform, and that's going to give you a leg up, especially when the situation involves an aggressive timeline. Non-integrated portal. Okay, now that in and of itself doesn't give us much information, and that's too why I choose depends. It depends on if you want to do it with a platform or DIY. So non-integrated, that's good. It's easier. There's not having to do with a lot of the data. Obviously, it doesn't maybe save time and create an efficient environment to begin with, but sometimes with the proof of concepts or never done e-commerce before, or industry doesn't do e-commerce, this is something that's more DIY. And so it really is a matter, all of this, whether even with the integrated B2C with standard retail, someone might, second guess me and say, hey, you know what? I think I can name that tune and do it as a DIY thing and do it in a year's time over doing it over with a platform. And that might be the case. Whereas the platform may bring to the table additional things that were not needed for phase one, but will certainly be required for phase two, like email marketing, targeted email marketing, some form of content personalization. I'll explain what that is. It's not clear to everybody what that is. But all of these things that have a need today versus a need later on. And that's where, with a platform, those needs today and later on exist in one piece today. And that's where there's an advantage to that. That as you build things piecemeal, if you're thinking and planning this on a larger scale of what you'll ultimately be doing, then some of the things like in building a home or a skyscraper, if you know that this is one day going to have 30 stories on top, then your foundation is going to be such that it can support at least 30 stories of floor space. And the same goes when you're developing this from scratch or using a platform. You're looking at the long-term big picture of what you imagine this heading off in the different directions and heads of it. And that it does take a lot of planning. And if you know the 7 P's of engineering about how, piss poor planning produces, poor results, e-commerce, web development, these are all custom software solutions, whether it's mostly done with a platform or all to be done using your creativity and your developers. It requires an enormous amount of planning. And even while you're in the midst of things and under the hood or at 50,000 feet, you still need to continue planning. Jump down too much here. Okay, so complex ordering system. Okay, this is where, from experience, that when the ordering process within the company, even however it's done today, whether it's done through an online system or it's done through a series of lots of paperwork, typically in a complex ordering system environment where there's numerous, maybe there's a configurator involved and there's all sorts of other things, I typically would recommend that it goes with a DIY approach. And that obviously is subject to argument, and I know why. It's just that when you have a specific way of doing things, a platform has been designed to support the average number of users who need this, not specific examples of complexity. And you may find yourself maybe starting off with a platform, but after all the customization, that WordPress or Magento site is now something completely different. It's just that in the case of Magento, especially Enterprise Magento, you've taken an existing platform that might have given you leverage on some things, but because you so customized it, you now have something that's more yours than it is Magento, but you'd still be paying a Magento fee. So you have to, look at that aspect of it as well, that just because you're using a platform and it might normally give you a leg up and an advantage of speed, time, resources, etc., but if you're needing to configure it or customize it so much that it ends up not looking like an e-commerce solution anymore, at least one that came out of the box with a platform, then you might want to go a different route, like custom. And then here, project can use 1/10 of the platform, and that's basically the same thing. It's that, like, it's like, oh wow, they have a great user management system. This is great. This is what we need, but we're going to customize everything else. So this is a continuation of the previous one here of the complex ordering system. That platform, yeah, it gives you that bell and whistle that you wanted, but the additional customization is going to move you away from the platform. And I know here at Dynamic Web that we, our solution architects, that's what they're always fighting to keep, is that like, this is our platform. We work better when we're supporting the features of this platform, not supporting features that we completely customized on our platform that make our platform change. And therefore it makes support of it more complex, because we're trained to support the platform, not trained to support a custom solution off the platform. Okay, and then another last one here is the slow rollout of e-commerce. So again, this happens to everybody, that they want to go into e-commerce, but in a way they want to roll it out. If you're roll it out slowly, if you're dealing with customers that are they're traditional, to put it nicely. They want to place it by phone, fax, email, smoke signals, whatever they feel they want to do, they want to do it that way. So now you introduce them to the online way of doing things, which in your, purchasing from you, they'll do it the old-fashioned way. But when they want to buy something from Amazon, they have no complaints about using that interface. So in a slow rollout of e-commerce, often a platform is a good way of doing that, where there's not full-on commitment by everyone in the company. There's some commitment towards the resources, and the problem with doing it with DIY is that when you start a DIY or 100% custom project, you have to be in it to win it from the beginning. But if you're tentative about it and you're moving it slowly and experimenting it, if you go with the DIY way, you could start off with building a ladder and end up building an amusement park instead. And that may not serve you as intended. Whereas a platform, in a way, keeps you confined to what the platform is capable of doing. And if you're using an e-commerce platform, of course, you're going to stay confined that way. It's kind of like the difference between like the ab roller, that product for doing the perfect ab, versus doing a crunch on your own. Obviously, for free, you can do a crunch on your own. But the ab roller testified that you're doing it in a specific way, in a controlled way. It's easy. You get on the floor, you get a text message, and now you're just texting laying in your back, not doing that crunch. The ab roller, at least you're hanging on to these bars. There's no way to text, because you can't text without your hands, mostly. And then that's how it keeps you confined to that project. So just some food for thought here around what's possible with a custom solution versus a platform. This part here, unlike the previous slide here, is more conversation that could be had on, doing it this way or going this route. But again, all I'm trying to paint over here is that it requires a lot of deep thinking and looking at it, and present day and future. And sometimes in the future, you don't have ideas and concepts of also what technology is changing. Obviously, we know everything's going more cloud-based. We also know that everything is more mobile friendly. But what will be that third thing that changes all platforms and changes what needs to be done in all custom is yet to be discovered or realized. All right, so so now I'm just changing now to more about like, what if you were to go a platform route, what are some features that platforms have? And I'm going to start painting that for you here, and then I'm going to wrap up with giving you a little introduction to Dynamic Web and how we do things as a platform. So here, site features that fuel long-term success. So it's a smattering of different things. Some things are missing, but just to give you a general idea of things. So integration, this is what we're talking about here. We're talking about integrated e-commerce. So We're talking about integration to AX versions, let's say from 2009, where web services exist, to present day D365 and all the versions in between, to be able to communicate so that the system of record, the master data for the use throughout the company also supports a new tentacle, which would be e-commerce. That could be B2B, B2C, a blend of both. It could be a portal, something in that realm of B2B, B2C. And then a content management system. So like I mentioned, your e-commerce site is a blend of your brochure and your shopping system. So the content management is really managing content that is maybe static content around product information or around information about your business, etc. Favorites list. This is the #1 secret ingredient for all B2B sites. Because unlike B2C, where customers want to browse, and through browsing that they discover that they need to add this and this and this to the cart, B2B is different. They want to go in, place an order, come out, be done with it, all in a matter of minutes if they can. And an address book allows them to shave off all the time that they have to browse manually to find things. They're going to see what either they themselves put into their favorites list or what their sales rep put into the favorites list for them. Because let's face it, customers don't always know what they need to get. And the favorites list helps with constraining that so that they can go in, select a bunch of things, and go out. Address book. So I painted how, sometimes you can forget about making this, but having the ability to ship to different places and locations based on whatever it is being ordered is essential. That's essential too. So quoting, that's another aspect of it. So similar to the e-commerce experience, whether you transact with a purchase order number or you transact using a credit card, quoting kind of transcends all that. It's obviously the concept of placing an order at a certain quantity and cost per unit, and then seeing if, and in some businesses, quoting is the first step. It's not placing an order. You do a quote first. And whether it's negotiating the pricing of products or it's simply just to have that quote, the next step for a quote in its life is to be converted into an order. And then when converted to an order, we commonly see that being pushed into the ERP. Whereas in quoting, that could live outside of the ERP if you didn't want it to be put inside there. And then product catalog. This is the structured database of product information. Now, when you get product information out of an ERP, it's limited. It may have the SKU. It has a short description. It may have a picture, but just one picture. It has a price, and it has an inventory level. But this is B2C, right? If you spend any time on Amazon, one thing that Amazon has going for itself that I particularly enjoy are all the reviews of the products, because I want to know from the testament of people who've used this product how it is. I don't necessarily need to know all there is. But when doing research, like Amazon sells products that I could buy at another website and so forth, or I can go to Best Buy store or go big box store and buy it. So the concept of product information management, the last bullet or checkbox here on the list here on the left side, is where you use a PIM, product information management, to take what the ERP gave us in very minimal sense and now add in all the things that my B2C environment wants to see. They want to see lots of videos. They want to see lots of pictures. They want to see lots of content that they can read about. This, in the B2B environment, is commonly they just need a SKU and that's it. They don't even need any pictures. I totally get that. But in the B2C environment, this is where people are searching by that information, and that's how they find your website. And that's where, and only how, that information is enriched properly using a PIM. Often people will use a lot of Excel spreadsheets and try to correlate that using 3D sheets to connect it to, when you have a structured database with relationships inside your e-commerce, which correlates to that structure inside of the ERP. that could be leveraged to add more information that's into something we call a PIM. All right, so moving along here, we got A/B split test. That's how you can split test two different pages. This now is more in the realm of marketing and marketing people. Targeted email marketing. I'm going to show you that with our example of dynamic web. Automatic content personalization, another example. So imagine in the brick and mortar world, you have a store. Let's say you have a jewelry store, and you have some parking out front. The nice thing about having parking out front is you get to see what the clients are driving when they come in to buy something. So when the guy shows up in a Ferrari into the front, and you're hoping he walks into your store, and he does, you're not going to show him the silver in the front of the store. You're going to go all the way back to the vault and show all the diamonds that you have. How do you simulate that on the web? And that's with something called content personalization, whereby on-site behavior or incoming behavior. Incoming is the example of the guy in the Ferrari. Let's say instead of the Ferrari, he came into our website from a Facebook page that we operate, or from a YouTube channel that we operate. We can see what that YouTube video was that he was looking at and show that on the homepage. Maybe show the product, not the video, on the homepage. So this way he remains engaged from coming in just seconds earlier from another site, and we're not showing all of the products we sell, even though we might sell 10,000 products. This person is coming in with an intent on one product that came in from a sister channel that we have. So by all means, we need technology to keep them focused, because in this day and age of all this noise, people will get a text message and completely forget what they were doing to begin with. At least that happens to me. And then last here is promo codes, gift cards, subscriptions, buy X, get Y. This type of stuff may be more in the retail world of things, but in B2C e-commerce, it's standard. You're competing against so many people, so getting a promo code out there on social media for the holidays or whatever, having gift cards, giving people other opportunities to buy for their friends using gift cards, subscriptions. So instead of ordering that box of tea every month like our customers on our customer Twinings USA, the tea company, does, you can automatically subscribe to it. And we had this subscription long before Amazon started including subscription-based purchases. And then buy X, get Y. That's a very common retail behavior. You buy this and you get the next one off at 50% off. You see that in a supermarket, and you see that in a store as well. And that can be complicated to implement from scratch, but having that inside of a platform, knowing very well that that's what you're going to be doing or get to be doing, is exciting, especially when you have that, and that definitely fuels long-term success. Another thing I just want to paint on long-term success side is that we find a lot of customers come to us and they're singly focused on one dimension of this entire thing, and that is integrating into the ERP. And I don't blame them, because often those are the IT people who are in charge of making sure everything's running smoothly. But that person is often just the gatekeeper. Beyond that person, in what I call a deeper dive, I'm usually having it with the marketing people in the company who finally see, here's a product that is smart and intelligent, has included it all inside the system, so that that single integration point with dynamic web, let's say, leverages things that transcend what you thought were the only things an ERP benefits, which would have been the product catalog as well as trade agreements and specific pricing. There's actually more than that the ERP can benefit, and I'll explain that. So in this diagram here, this is how dynamic web situates itself between the data source. It could be your AX server, D365 for operations, and let's say you're using Dynamic CRM or Salesforce.com. You can get 2 or more data sources connected, 1 or more data sources connected. Let's say you have AX and you also have an Excel spreadsheet that has things for some reason never got pulled into AX. You can actually connect that way as well, because in reality we're connecting using web services, and we're basically in batch mode looking at XML files coming off the ERP and then reading them and bringing them over into dynamic web and our database storage for performance. But ultimately, the ERP and the CRM and the other systems of record we connect to remain those things, and we want it to remain those things. We, in essence, are providing the pretty interface as well as a lot of mechanics to support B2Bs and B2Cs without having to build it from scratch. And then in the far right, what we call the omni-channel, it's the website, it's got to be mobile friendly, it's going to have an online store aspect to it, whether you take credit cards, Bitcoin, whatever, or nothing, that works as well. Self-service portal, this is definitely where that single integration point benefits things, because customers don't have to call in anymore and say, hey, what do we do year to date so far? Where's my order? They can log in and help themselves with that information. And that is also leveraged by the single integration to your ERP. Email marketing, that also benefits. Social media, you can push out the product to Facebook and Twitter out of the box, let people know what you're selling. And third-party marketplaces, you can use our platform to not only support your B2B and B2C websites, but you can also sell through Amazon that way as well. And right in the center is where we situate ourselves. Integration framework, like I said, whether it's AX 2012 or 2009 to D365, we're using web services, so we're hanging outside of the ERP, so you don't go inside the ERP to make any changes. You have to use a separate product, and plenty of advantages of doing it that way. We have way more flexibility, and talk about flexibility and how some platforms can be rigid. Dynamic web, not so much, and I'll try to explain some of that to you in a few seconds here. Development platform means that you get a license from us, you're getting the full kit and caboodle, so the development platform that we use to make your website, as well as the development platform that you could use to further enhance your website. But we have so many features already baked in, you may not find yourself doing that. All right, and then of course we have content, e-commerce, marketing, and the PIM system built in. All right, so let me dive here into live demo really quickly here, just to show you what's what with things. Now, when you're on the front end of a website, the designs of a website, just to show you some examples of some customers over here that use dynamic web and our AX customers as well. So Magpul here, firearms accessories manufacturer. This is their B2C site. So you see B2C is more vibrant images, and that's also part of the Magpul brand. This is a 99% male audience who are firearms enthusiasts. And so when they launch a new YouTube video, they'll get 200,000 customers landing on their site ready to buy. So in that respect, it's very exciting and charged that way. Then you have here a company called Forney. They are both a blend of B2B and B2C, and what these guys are doing is that they're selling welding equipment. So I could be a welding company of 4 guys. I just started. I need 2 welding equipments. I can go over here. I'm a business. But I'm a welder myself, a freelance welder. I need equipment myself. I can go here and buy it as well. And it's that login that looks inside of AX to determine, is this person a web customer or a cash customer, whatever you might call them, or an account. And so that's where the power of e-commerce comes in, to simulate a lot of what is possible, what is expected. I mean, thanks to Amazon, Amazon's not only leading the pack, and in a way, being like today's Walmart competing against the mom and pop stores. But thanks to technology, thanks to 20 years in the making of e-commerce, you can find a platform that's going to give you an advantage to play against Amazon. What you do with that is wholly up to you and how you do it. And goes without saying, but your entire operation for fulfilling that order and delivering it on time must be solid, because we know Amazon is known for its supply chain expertise. So it's possible, it's never too late to make your website more than it can be, but do it smartly, do it right, and roll it out cautiously to customers that you may have to test drive things. So, I was hoping to show some of our back end, Arnold, but with 10 minutes left, I don't want to chance it. I want to leave room for any questions, and maybe some questions would take me into the back end.
All right. Thanks for the presentation, Richard. I will look for any questions for 30 seconds. So if you have any questions, just put them in, and then I'll read them off. Give it a little bit of time. All right, we have our first question. Someone's asking, we haven't embarked on e-commerce at all. We still have orders by phone, fax, and email. What's your recommendation to get started so that we can get our feet wet to try things out with the least amount of commitment?
Okay, all right, well, that's kind of what I've been painting. So, all right, so I think the last one is interesting, the least amount of commitment. And maybe we'll start with that one because of all the characteristics you described, it could be, 50-50 go with custom or platform. But the least amount of commitment, I'll assume a blend of things: time, money, expertise, getting people, numbers of people involved. If that's the case, then you might want to just go the non-platform way as a total proof of concept experiment. And in that slide, the very first one of like describing a scenario, that describes that person's scenario where try to see first what your competition is doing. And if you can tell what they're doing, sometimes with B2B, it's behind a wall. You can't really tell what happens behind that wall. See what your competition is doing, and then see what they're doing. Don't do all of it, and there's only so much of it that you can actually see, and then the rest you're guessing. But maybe start off with a simple single page, and it all depends on your audience. If your audience of customers are 20-something, then by all means, you want to lean into doing a platform and getting it done right, because that's a younger generation that's going to want to order online. But if it's more of the older people who are okay with faxing, but they're better off with emailing, and they're still great with calling, then finding you'll never find a proper middle ground that's on a website. But let's say like Forney, we were able to make a best of both worlds, where a customer, once they're logged in, can upload a simple spreadsheet, Excel spreadsheet, where column A has the SKUs and column B has the quantities, and that will populate the cart. So that's a possibility, right? And that possibility could be made through a platform like ours, or it could be made from scratch. I would say, play around with maybe a lower end or a cheap, inexpensive platform like a WordPress platform, as well as making your own pages to start experimenting, and get your best customers that love you even when you make mistakes, to try it out, and then let them kind of rule and dictate what it is. You might have an idea, but at the end of the day, your customers need something, and finding it for them might be also speaking to the other one similar to them. Hope that helps.
All right, we have another one. Someone asked, since it seems that the sky's the limit, and being that apps are also so popular these days, what does a small e-commerce solution look or act like?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. There's so many interpretations of e-commerce, and when you're using a platform, it's going a very traditional route. But if you're looking at something that's maybe non-traditional, and that's because the product line or your audiences are either younger, or it's more specialized, whatever it might be, you want to look and see, at the end of the day, is this easy for my customers to use? and utilize? Is it easy for them to search and find products that they don't commonly buy, but I want them to buy? Is there a favorites list? Is it some way that saves them time, makes money for them faster, or makes them happier faster if this is B2C? So whatever that might be, there's plenty of fancy things out there, but aren't you always shaking your head wondering, like, why did they even make this? This is so complicated. This is, first it took forever to download on my phone, and it crashes all the time. So, you know, before you embark on making the next Titanic that actually doesn't sink and does reach its end point, try to, you know, experiment. And you might find yourself, you know, obviously the ones who know this, they probably spent a lot of time researching, and they say, okay, we need to identify these 4 platforms and narrow it down to one and go with that one. But then there are plenty of unique businesses that maybe never felt that any of these fit like a glove, but they don't want to go the DIY route, so they are still searching. But, you know, I mean, play around with even things that are existing markets like Amazon, but the people fulfilling through Amazon. Look at like Etsy and how that works. Look at eBay and how that works. And then start to become your own armchair expert in it. And then you can start to see like, oh, okay, I could take elements of this platform and this site, and maybe we could do something like this. Now, even before you even embark on that, have someone draw that up and share it with your customers, because it would suck if you spent a lot of time and energy building your dream when in reality it only serves one person, you yourself, and you spend all that time and money, and it's not benefiting enough people for it to be worth the effort of making. And if all those things don't make sense, then shoot me an email and we can try to, you know, just point you in the right direction to begin with the minimal things you need, and then see how you grow from there. Up the house.
Right. We have time for one more. A user asks, should the integration be considered from the beginning or later?
Okay, good question. Yeah. So when you're doing an integrated site, you know, I've encountered people where they're like, you know what, management doesn't even support this. We don't have any initiatives around this. Let's just make a WordPress site, and then we'll find a plugin for $100 that'll integrate to AX 2012. And they make the website, they're proud of it, everything, and then guess what? That plugin for $100, even though they bought it, there's no way in hell it's going to connect to AX in the way we thought it would. And then you shop and shop and you realize there's no plugin for WordPress to do that sort of thing. And then now you're like, okay, we spent this time, we got this look and feel of things, and now this is actually just a proof of concept. So that one, they thought of taking a shortcut into hooking up the ERP later. Now, the other caveat with hooking up the ERP now or later is that data isn't always the cleanest data. It might be the master data for the entire company. But when it comes down to opening up let's say, customer records and opening it all up and comparing one to the next, I've seen it where some people use the city field to include a color of something. I don't know why. And now there's an inconsistency. So the sooner you can start the integration, the sooner you'll encounter problems, the sooner you'll get over those problems, and the sooner you'll be closer to a fully integrated system. Because that's something that we might have templates to get you going with all versions of AX and NAV 2009 to present day, Business Central D365. It still has no way. We have no way, and no partner and no competitor of ours has any way of foreseeing how difficult the challenge will be around the ERP integration, because it's very dirty. The data has not been consistently input by various people. So at that point, it's like started sooner than later. It's, you know, you're going to build a bridge and connecting two cities together. you have to already be looking at the other side that you're going to be connecting on, whether you're going to do it in 6 months or a year later. Address it first and foremost, because what you're resisting is going to persist, and that problem's still going to be there whether you face it today or tomorrow.
All
Hope
right.
that helps.
Great. And now we are out of time, and that wraps up today's webinar. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Richard, for the presentation. I'm sure many of our attendees have a better idea now on how to move forward with their e-commerce initiatives. I hope to see everyone in the next webinar. Goodbye and have a nice day. Bye.
Bye-bye.